Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and this is part two of my live reading of Mitch Albom's "The Five People You Meet in Heaven." Now, last night's reading was chapter one, and chapter one was about Eddie's last day on Earth, or his last hours on Earth, I should say. And now this chapter is his journey or ascension to heaven. Okay? So here we go. I hope you enjoy. This is chapter two of Mitch Albom's Five People You Meet in Heaven. And if you haven't read this book or you're interested in the book, watch my last video. And yeah, here we go. This is chapter two. Eddie saw nothing of his final moment on Earth. Nothing of the pier or the crowd or the shattered fiberglass. Sorry, fiberglass car. In the stories about life after death, the souls of often float above the goodbye moment, hovering over police cars and highway accidents, or clinging like a spider to hospital room ceilings. These are people who receive a second chance, who somehow, for some reason, resume their place in the world. Eddie, it appeared, was not getting a second chance. Where? The sky was a misty pumpkin shade and a deep turquoise and a bright lime. Eddie was floating, and his arms were still extended. The tower card was falling. He remembered that. The little girl, Annie, she was crying. He remembered that. He remembered lunging. He remembered hitting the platform. He felt her two small hands in his. Then what? Did I save her? Eddie could only picture in a distance, as if it happened years ago. Stranger still, he could not feel any emotions that went with it. He could only feel calm, like a child, in the cradle of his mother's arms. Where? The sky around him changed again to grapefruit yellow, and then to forest green, then to a pink that Eddie momentarily associated with, of all things, cotton candy. Did I save her? Did she live? Where is my worry? Where is my pain? That was what was missing. Every hurt he ever suffered, every ache he ever endured, it was all gone, as an expired breath. He could not feel agony. He could not feel sadness. His consciousness felt smoky, wisp-like, incapable of anything but calm. Below him now, the colors changed. Again, something was swirling. Water, an ocean. He was floating over a vast yellow sea. Now it turned melon, sapphire. Now he began to drop, hurtling toward the surface. It was faster than anything he ever imagined. Yet there was as much as a breeze on his face, and he felt no fear. He was in the sands of a golden shore. Then he was underwater, and everything was silent. Where is my worry? Where is my pain? Today is A's birthday. He is 5 years old. It is a Sunday afternoon at Ruby Pier. Picnic tables are set along the boardwalk, which overlooks the long white beach. There is a vanilla cake with blue wax candles. There is a bowl of orange juice. The pier workers are milling about. The bankers, the barkers, the slideshow acts, the animal trainers summon from the fishery. Eddie's father, as usual, is in a card game. Eddie plays at his feet. His older brother Joe is doing push-ups in front of a group of elderly women who feign interest and clap politely. Eddie is wearing his birthday gift, a red cowboy hat and a toy holster. He gets up and runs from one group to the next, pulling out the toy gun, going bang, bang. Come here, boy. Mickey Shea beckons from a beach. Bang, bang, goes Eddie. Mickey Shea works with Eddie's dad, fixing the rides. He is fat and wears suspenders and is always singing Irish songs. To Eddie, he smells funny, like cough medicine. Come here. Let me do your birthday bumps, he says, like we do in Ireland. Suddenly, Mickey's large hands are under Eddie's armpits and he is hoisted up, flipped over and dangled by his feet. Eddie's hat falls off. Careful, Mickey, Eddie's father yells. Eddie's mother yells. Eddie's father looks up, smirks, and then returns to his card game. Ho ho, I got him, Mickey says. Now, one birthday bump for each year. Mickey lowers Eddie gently, and his head brushes on the floor. One. Mickey lifts Eddie back up, and the other join in laughing. They yell, 2, 3. Upside down, Eddie is not sure who is who. His head is getting heavy. 4, they shout. 5. Eddie is flipped right side up and put down. Everyone claps. Eddie reaches for his hat, then stumbles over. He gets up, wobbles to Mickey Shea, and punches him in the arm. Ho ho! What was that for, little man? Mickey says. Everyone laughs. Eddie turns and runs away. 3 steps before being swept in his mother's arms. Are you all right, my darling birthday boy? She is only inches from his face. He sees her deep red lipstick and her plump soft cheeks and the wave of her auburn hair. I was upside down, he tells her. I saw it, she says. She puts his hat back on his head. Later, she will walk him along the pier, perhaps take him on an elephant ride or watch the fishermen in their evening nets, the fish flipping like shiny wet coins. She will hold his hand and tell him God is proud of him for being a good boy on his birthday, and that will make the world feel right side up again. Chapter 2 is short, so I'm going to read Chapter 3 to fill in the time that Chapter 1 filled in last video. The arrival. Eddie awoke in a teacup. It was part of some old amusement park ride. A large teacup made of dark, polished wood with a cushioned seat and steel hinged door. Eddie's arms and legs dangled over the edges. The sky continued to change colors from a shoe leather brown to a deep scarlet. His instinct was to reach for his cane. He had kept it by his bed for the last few years because there were mornings he could no longer have the strength to get up without it. This embarrassed Eddie, who used to punch men in the shoulders when he greeted them. But now there was no cane, so Eddie exulted and tried to pull himself up. Surprisingly, his back didn't hurt. His legs did not throb. He yanked harder and hoisted himself easily over the edge of the teacup, landing awkwardly on the ground, where he was struck by three quick thoughts. First, he felt wonderful. Second, he was all alone. Third, he was still on Ruby Pier. But it was a different Ruby Pier now. There were canvas tents and vacant grassy sections, and so few obstructions you could see the mossy breakwater out at sea. The colors of the attractions were firehouse reds and creamy whites, no teals, or maroons. And each ride had its own wooden ticket booth. The teacup he had awoken in was part of a primitive attraction called Spinorama. In its sign was plywood, as were the other low slung signs hinged on the storefronts that lined the prominent El Tiempo cigars. Now that's smoke. Chowda, 10 cents. Ride the Whipper, the sensation of the age. Eddie blinked hard. This was Ruby Pier of his childhood, some 75 years ago. Only everything was new, freshly scrubbed. Over there was the Loop ride, which had been torn down decades ago. And over there, the bathhouses and the saltwater swimming pools that had been razzed in the 1950s. Over there, jutting into the sky, was the original Ferris wheel in its pristine white paint. And beyond that, the streets of his old neighborhood and the rooftops of the crowded brick tenements with laundry lines hanging out the windows. Eddie tried to yell, but his voice was raspy air. He mouthed a hey, but nothing came out of his throat. He grabbed his arms and legs aside. From his lack of voice, he felt incredible. He walked in a circle. He jumped, no pain. In the last 10 years, he had forgotten what it was like to walk without wincing or to sit down without struggling to find comfort in his lower back. On the outside, he looked the same as he had that morning, a squint, barrel-chested old man in a cap and shorts and a brown maintenance jersey. But he was limber. So limber, in fact, he could touch beyond his ankles and raise a leg to his belly. He explored his body like an infant, fascinated by the new mechanics, a rubber man doing a rubber man stretch. Then he ran. Ha ha, running. Eddie had not truly ran in more than 60 years. Not since the war, but he was running now, starting with a few gingerly steps, then accelerating into a full gait, faster, faster, like the running boy of his youth. He ran along the boardwalk, past a bait and tackle stand for fishermen 5 cents, and a bathing suit rental stand for swimmers 3 cents. He ran past a shoot ride called the Dipsy Doodle. He ran along Ruby Pier Promenade beneath magnificent buildings of Moorish design with spears and minarets and onion-shaped domes. He ran past the Parisian Carousel, with its carved wooden horses, glass mirrors, and Wurlitzer organ, all shiny and new. Only an hour to go, it seemed. He had been scraping rust from its pieces in his shop. He ran down the heart of the old Midway, where the weight guessers, fortune tellers, and the dancing gypsies had once worked. His lower chin and held in his arms out like a glider, and every few steps he would jump the way children do. Hopping, running, will turn to flying. It might have seemed ridiculous to anyone watching this white-haired maintenance worker all alone, making like an airplane, but the running boy inside every man, no matter how old he gets. Then Eddie stopped running. He heard something, a voice, tiny, as if coming through a megaphone. How about him, ladies and gentlemen? Have you ever seen such a horrible sight? Eddie was standing by an empty ticket kiosk in front of a large theater. The sign above read, "The world's most curious citizens, Ruby Pier sideshows. Holy smoke, they're fat, they're skinny. See the wild man." The sideshow, the freak house, the ballyhoo hall. Eddie recalled them shutting this down at least 50 years ago. About the time television became popular and people didn't need sideshows to tickle their imagination. Look upon this savage, born in a most particular handicap. Eddie peered into the entrance. He had encountered some old people there. There was Jolly Jane, who weighed over 500 pounds and needed 2 men to push her up the stairs. And there were conjoined twins who shared a spine and played musical instruments. There were men who swallowed swords, women with beards, and a pair of Indian brothers whose skin was rubbery from being stretched and soaked in oils until it hung in bunches from their limbs. Eddie, as a child, had felt sorry for the sideshow cast. They were forced to sit in booths or on stages, sometimes behind bars, as patrons walked past them, leering and pointing. A big barker would ballyhoo the oddity, and it was a barker's voice that Eddie heard now. Only a terrible twist of fate could leave a man in such pitiful condition. From the farthest corner of the world, we have brought him for your examination. Eddie entered the dark hall. The voice grew louder. This tragic soul has endured a perversion of nature. It was coming from the other side of the stage. Only here, at the world's most curious citizens, can you draw this near. Eddie pulled aside the curtain. Feast your eyes upon the most The baker's voice vanished, and Eddie stepped back in disbelief. There was something in a chair, alone on the stage, and a middle-aged man with narrow stooped shoulders, naked from the waist up. His belly sagged over his belt, his hair closely chopped. His lips were thin and his face was long and drawn. Eddie would have long since forgotten him, were if it not for one distant feature. His skin was blue. Hello, Edward, he said. I've been waiting for you. You know what? I'll read chapter 4 too. Why not? Because I think this is a pretty long chapter. Yeah, it's pretty lengthy. Yeah. Okay. Read chapter 4 too. First person Eddie meets in heaven. Don't be afraid, the blue man said, rising slowly from his chair. Don't be afraid. His voice was soothing, but Eddie could only stare. He had barely known this man. Why was he seeing him now? He was like one of these faces that pops in your dreams and the next morning you say, you'll never guess who I dreamed about last night. Your body feels like a child's, right? Eddie nodded. You were a child when you knew me, and that's why. You start with the same feelings you had. Start what? Eddie thought. The blue man lifted his chin. His skin was a grotesque shade and blueberry. His fingers were wrinkled. He walked outside. Eddie followed. The pier was empty. The beach was empty. Was the entire planet empty? Tell me something, the blue man said. He pointed to a two-humped wooden roller coaster in the distance. The Whipper. It was built in the 1920s under friction wheels, meaning the cars couldn't turn very quickly unless you wanted them launching off the track. The Whipper, is it still the fastest ride on Earth? And he looked at the old clanking thing, which had been torn down years ago. He shook his head no. Ah, said the blue man. I imagined as much. Things don't change here, and there's none of that peering down from the clouds, I'm afraid. Here, Eddie thought. The blue man smiled, as if he heard the question. He touched Eddie's shoulder, and Eddie felt a surge of warmth unlike anything he ever felt before. His thoughts came spilling out like sentences. How did I die? An accident, the blue man said. How long have I been dead? A minute, an hour, 1,000 years? Where am I? The blue man pursed his lips, then repeated the question thoughtfully. Where are you? He turned and raised his arms. All at once, the rides at old Ruby Pier cranked to life. The Ferris wheel spun. The Dodgem cars smacked into each other. The whipper cracked uphill, and the Parisian carousel horses bobbed on their brass poles to the cherry music of the Wurlitzer organ. The ocean was in front of them. The sky was the color of lemons. Where do you think? The blue man asked. Heaven. No. And he shook his head. No. The blue man seemed amused. No, it can't be heaven, he said. Why? Because this is where you grew up? And he mouthed the word. Yes. Ah, the blue man nodded. Well, people often belittle the place where they were born, but heaven can be found in the most unlikely corners, and heaven itself has many steps. This, for me, is the second, and for you, it's the first. He led Eddie through the park, passing cigar shops and sausage stands and flat joints where suckers lost their nickels and dimes. Heaven? Eddie thought, ridiculous. He had spent most of his adult life trying to get away from Ruby Pier. It was an amusement park, that's all. A place to scream and get wet and trade your dollars for Cupid dolls. The thought that this was some kind of blessed resting place was beyond his imagination. He tried again to speak, but this time he heard a small grunt in his chest. Your voice will come. We all go through the same thing. You cannot talk when you first arrive. He smiled. It helps you listen. There are 5 people you will meet in heaven, the blue man suddenly said. Each of us was in your life for a reason. You may not have known the reason at the time, and that is what heaven is for understanding your life on earth. Eddie looked confused. People think of heaven as a paradise garden, a place where they can float on the clouds and laze in rivers and mountains. But scenery without solace is meaningless. This is the greatest gift God can give you, to understand what happened in your life, to have it explained. It is the peace you have been searching for. Eddie coughed, trying to bring up his voice. He was tired of being silent. I'm the first person, Edward. When I died, my life was illuminated by 5 others, and then I came here to wait for you, to stand in your line to tell you my story, which becomes part of yours. There will be others for you too. Some you knew, maybe some you didn't, but they all crossed your path before they died. And they altered it forever. Eddie pushed a sound up from his chest as hard as he could. What? He finally croaked. His voice seemed to be breaking through his shell like a baby chick. What? Guilt. The blue man waited patiently. What killed you? The blue man looked a bit surprised. He smiled at Eddie. You did, he said. Today is Eddie's birthday. He is 7 years old, and his gift was a new baseball. He squeezes it in each hand, feeling a surge of power that runs up his arm. He imagines he is one of the heroes on the Cracker Jack collector's cards, maybe the great picture Walter Johnson. This is going back to the 20s, okay? Cracker Jack collection cards. I'll pause right there real quick to explain that because people may not get the reference. If you look at any book that references Cracker Jack prizes, like Spaceballs, Five People Meet in Heaven, so on and so forth, any movie or book that mentions Cracker Jack prizes, essentially at one time, in Cracker Jacks, there would be baseball cards or some gimmicky toy. You didn't know what you were going to get in each package of Cracker Jacks. And today it's some sticker or some app sticker that you function with your iPhone or any Apple device or Android, whatever. But years ago, Cracker Jacks was you either got baseball cards from it or a small prize. That's what they're referencing. Here. Anyway, continuing. Here, toss it. His brother Joe says. They're running along the midway past the game booth, where if you knock over 3 green bottles, you win a coconut and a straw. Come on, Eddie, Joe says. Share. Eddie stops and imagines himself in a stadium. He throws the ball. His brother pulls in his elbows and ducks. Too hard, Joe yells. My ball leg springs. Dang you, Joe. Eddie watches it thump down the boardwalk and bang off a post into a small clearing behind the sideshow tent. He runs after it. Joe follows. The crowd, they drop into the ground. You see it? Eddie says, no. A whomping noise interrupts them. A tent flaps open. Eddie and Joe look up. There is a grossly fat woman and a shirtless man with reddish hair covering his entire body. Freaks from the Freak Show. Freaks. What are you wise horses doing back here? The hairy man says, grinning. Looking for trouble? Joe's lip trembles. He starts to cry. This is the older brother, okay? This is fucking pathetic. I would expect the younger brother to cry. I guess the younger brother has more balls than the old. That's always been my pet peeve with the character Joe. Anyway, Joe's lips trembles. He starts to cry. He jumps and runs away. His arms pumping wildly. Eddie rises too, then sees his ball against a sawhorse. He eyes the shirtless man and moves slowly towards it. This is mine, he mumbles. He scoops up the ball and runs after his brother. Listen, mister, Eddie rasped. I never killed you, okay? I don't even know you. The blue man sat on the bench. He smiled as if trying to put a guest at ease. Eddie remained standing, a defensive posture. Let me begin with my real name, the blue man said. I was christened Joseph Krvelchik, the son of a tailor in a small Polish village. We came to America in 1894. I was only a boy. My mother held me over the railing of the ship, and this became my earliest childhood memory. My mother swinging me in the breeze of a new world. Like most immigrants, we had no money. We slept on a mattress in my uncle's kitchen. My father was forced to take jobs in sweatshops, sewing buttons on coats. When I was 10, he took me from school, and I joined him. Eddie watched the blue man's pitted face, his thin lips, and sagging chest. Why is he telling me this, Eddie thought. I was a nervous child by nature. I was too young to be there amongst all those men, swearing and complaining. Whenever the four men came near, my father told me, look down. Don't make him notice you. Once I ever stumbled and dropped a sack of buttons, and then, which spilled over the floor. The foreman screamed that I was a worthless child, that I must go. I can still see that moment. My father pleading with him like a street beggar. The foreman sneering, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. I felt my stomach twist in pain. Then I felt something wet on my leg. I looked down. The foreman pointed at my soiled pants and laughed, and the other workers laughed too. After that, my father refused to speak to me. He felt I had shamed him, and I supposed in his world I had. But fathers can ruin their sons, and I was, in a fashion, ruined after that. I was a nervous child, and when I grew a nervous young man. Worst of all, at night, I still wet the bed. In the mornings, I would sneak the soiled sheets to the wash basin and soak them. One morning, I look up to see my father. He saw the dirty sheets. Then he glared at me with eyes that I will never forget, as if he wished he could snap the cord of life between us. The blue man paused, his skin, which seemed to be soaked in blue fluid, foiled with a small fatty layers around his belt. Eddie couldn't help staring. I was not always a freak, Edward, he said, but back then medicine was rather primitive. I went to be a chemist, seeking something for my nerves. He gave me a bottle of silver nitrate and told me to mix it with water and take it every night. Silver nitrate, it was later considered poison. But it was all I had. When it failed to work, I could only assume I was not ingesting enough, so I took more. I swallowed 2 gulps and sometimes 3, with no water. Soon people were looking at me strangely. My skin was turning the color of ash. I was ashamed and agitated. I swallowed even more silver nitrate until my skin went from gray to blue, a side effect of the poison. The blue man paused, his voice dropped. The factory dismissed me. The foreman said I scared the other workers. Without work, how could I eat? Where would I live? I found a saloon, a dark place where I could hide beneath a hat and a coat. One night, a group of carnival men were in the back. They smoked cigars. They laughed. One of them, a rather small fellow with a wooden leg, kept looking at me. Finally, he approached. By the end of the night, I had agreed to join their carnival, and my life as a commodity had begun. Eddie noticed the resigned look on the blue man's face. He had often wondered where the sideshow cast came from. He assumed there was a sad story behind every one of them. The carnival gave me names, Edward. Sometimes I was the blue man of the North Pole, or the blue man of Allegra, or the blue man in New Zealand. I had never been to any of these places, of course, but it was pleasant to be considered exotic, if only on a painted sign. Sad story. Holy shit. Feel bad for the guy. The sign. No, sorry. The show was simple. I would sit on the stage, half undressed as people walked past, and the barker told them how pathetic I was. For this, I was able to put a few coins in my pocket. The manager once called me the best freak in the stable and said, and then say as it sounds, I took pride in that. When you are an outcast and even tossed stoned can be cherished. One winter, I came to the pier, Ruby Pier. There, starting a sideshow called The Curious Citizens. I like the idea of being in one place, escaping the bumpy horses, carts of carnival life. This became my home. I lived in a room above the sausage shop. I played cards at night with the other sideshow workers, with the tinsmith, sometimes even with your father in the early mornings. If I wore long shirts and dropped my head in a towel, I could even walk along this beach without scaring people. This may not sound like much, but for me, it was a freedom I had rarely known. He stopped, looked at Eddie. Do you understand why we're here? This is not your heaven, it's mine. Take one story viewed from 2 different angles. Take a rainy Sunday morning in July in the late 1920s when Eddie and his friends were tossing a baseball Eddie got for his birthday nearly a year ago. Take a moment when that ball flies over Eddie's head and out into the street. Eddie, wearing tawny pants and a wool cap, chases after it and runs in front of an automobile, a Ford Model A. The car screeches, veers, and just misses him. He shivers, exhales, gets the ball, and races back to his friends. The game soon ends, and the children run to the arcade. The eerie digger machine, with its claw-like mechanicalisms that picks up small toys. Now, that the same story from a different angle. A man is behind the wheel of a Ford Model A, which he has borrowed from a friend to practice his driving. The road is wet from the morning rain. Suddenly, a baseball bounces across the street, and a boy comes racing after it. The driver slams on the brakes, and he yanks on the wheel. The car skids. The tires screech. The man somehow regains control of the Model T. No, Model A. Model T didn't come until later. The man somehow regains the Model A, rolls on. The child has disappeared in the rearview mirror, but the man's body is still affected, thinking how close he came to tragedy. The jolt of adrenaline has forced his heart to pump furiously, and this heart is not a strong one, and the pumping leaves him drained. The man feels dizzy, and his head drops momentarily. His automobile nearly collides with another. The second the driver honks, the man veers again, spinning the wheel, pushing on the brake pedal. He skids along an avenue, then turns down an alley. His vehicle rolls until it collides with the rear of a parked truck. There is a small crashing noise. The headlights shatter. The impact smacks the man into the steering wheel. His forehead bleeds. He steps from the Model A, sees the damage, then collapses onto the wet pavement. His arm throbs. His chest hurts. It's a Sunday morning. The alley is empty. He remains there unnoticed, slumped against the side of the car. The blood from his coronary arteries no longer flows to his heart. An hour passes. A policeman finds him. A medical examiner pronounces him dead. The cause of death is listed as heart attack. There are no known relatives. Take one story viewed from two different angles. It is the same day, the same moment, but one angle ends happily at an arcade with a little boy in tawny pants dropping pennies into the eerie digger machine, and the other ends badly in a city morgue where one worker calls another worker over to marvel at the blue skin of the newest arrival. You see? Eddie whispered. No, you see, the blue man whispered. Having finished the story from his point of view. Little boy. Eddie felt a shiver. Oh no. he whispered. Today is Eddie's birthday. He is 8 years old. He sits on the edge of a plaid couch, and his arms are crossed in anger. His mother is at his feet, trying his shoes. His father is in the mirror fixing his tie. I don't want to go, Eddie says. I know, his mother says, not looking up, but we have to. Sometimes you have to do things when sad things happen. But it's my birthday. Eddie looks mournfully across the room at the erector set in the corner, Apollo toys, metal grinders, and 3 small rubber wheels. And he had been making a truck. He is good at putting things together. He had hoped to show it to his friends at a birthday party. Instead, they had to go to some place and get dressed up. It isn't fair, he thinks. His brother Joe, dressed in wool pants and a bow tie, enters with a baseball glove in his left hand. He slaps it hard, makes a face at Eddie. Those were my old shoes, Joe says. My new ones are better. Eddie winces. He hates having to wear Joe's old things. Stop wiggling, his mother says. They hurt, Eddie winces. Enough, Eddie's father yells. Glares at Eddie. Eddie goes silent. At the cemetery, Eddie barely recognizes the pier people. The men who normally wear gold lame and red turbans are now in black suits, like his father. The women now seem to be wearing the same black dress. Some cover their faces in veils. Eddie watches a man shovel dirt into a hole. The man says something about ashes. Eddie holds his mother's hand and squints at the sun. He is supposed to be sad, he knows, but secretly counting numbers from 1, hoping by the time he reaches 1,000, he will have his birthday back. Anyway, we will pick up at chapter 5 tomorrow night. As promised, I did chapter 2, but I added 2 more chapters to fill in the space that chapter 1 did. So anyway, hope you are enjoying the book. So until next time, see ya.